Hi, I'm Kristen Brandt, and today we're going to continue our talk with applying conventions with video 3. So, where we were focusing on our bibliography and the use of citations, what we want to transition now is into using an academic voice. And how do we make sure that what we're writing is for the correct purpose and that our ability to communicate our ideas is clear and consistent? So that's really what we're going to dig into is that good writers communicate clearly with a consistent style that's appropriate for an academic audience. And if you haven't taken anything from my videos, is that idea of consistency, clarity. How do we know what that is? How do I know what I'm talking about with an academic audience? So when we talk about an academic voice, it's understanding your audience. We're not hanging out with our friends. We're not sending a text to our buddies, or we're not putting out a tweet. What we are doing is we're communicating our academic work, our research to our peers, to our teacher, and eventually this is going to go to AP readers, which are teachers that don't know you, and some college professors. So what we're writing for is an academic, an educated audience. I do want to encourage you to limit the use of personal pronouns. It doesn't mean we don't ever use a personal pronoun in our writing. Just so you know, the social studies teacher in me has a hard time saying that. But what we want to do is make sure that they're purposeful in how we use them, that they're making a strong point. We want to make sure that the academic work, the research that you've done is coming forward and it's not just your own personal opinion that's demonstrating the work. The other thing that we want to talk about is really watch the use of colloquial phrases. That idea of kind of the casual conversation or things you might say with your friends, um, hit the hay. Okay, so I went to bed. Or, kind of, well, how about saying something similar almost? I hear a lot of probably, hey, that's okay. How about saying that's acceptable? So finding those suggested substitutions, but making sure we understand it all goes back to knowing your audience. We're not just talking with our friends. The other thing we want to encourage you is understanding the precision of terms and using the same definition consistently throughout your paper. I'm highlighting the definition of perception because a few years ago, we had part of our performance task was centered around the theme of perception. And what we found with students is that they would bounce in and out of understanding some of those definitions. And sometimes when I'm reading it, the term perception they were using, they were probably meaning observation, but another time they were maybe talking about consciousness. So we want to just really make sure when you're writing, you're consistent in that interpretation of the definition. The other thing we want to make sure is we're not just substituting words for those terms. I know that sometimes we want to rely on a thesaurus and we want to make sure that trying to use some variety in those terms. But if I'm pulling from one part of a definition to another part, I could lose the meaning of that paper pretty clearly. You also want to make sure your tone and your voice is consistent with who you are. Because if you're starting to use words that don't reflect you, that that's also not going to be authentic and that's going to come across in your work as well. So what do I mean by that? We're going to look at 3 examples where we see kind of a lot of errors to where we see some really clear writing and in their consistent tone. So this first one is what we're going to consider a low sample. I put the pause button on here and I'm going to stop talking in just a second so that you can just look through this. So read through it and see why we might consider this a low sample. So I'm hoping you paused. And what I'm hoping is that maybe you saw something such as here, in the environment since the cavemen roamed the earth, and talking in these huge generalities. Maybe you also saw a number of, I believe that humans have the potential. Why don't you just say humans have the potential to improve the environment? Or instead of we humans, just say humans have been trying to improve mean, I might change that entire sentence, but the point is that we could take that out and it would strengthen. Other things that we could talk about too is that we see some errors within some punctuation. And so if I continue reading, I'll let you pause again. Take a look. You're going to see some other issues as we continue to read through this. Okay, I'm assuming you've paused and you're back with me. Um, but you'll notice we're missing some punctuation. But did you notice we do have some colloquial language here? You got to spend money to make money, or even some of this personal. My idea is ridiculous as the quote. This distracts and takes away from the academic tone. You're trying to prove that you've done this research, that you've gone out and you have really looked for these academic studies and journals, really pull from there. And then you've watched some of the videos on how we use they say, I say, and how we can really bring in that academic voice to strengthen the interpretation of that information. So let's take a look at a medium sample. Again, I'm going to let you pause and read through this. So hopefully you're back with me now. What you'll notice is that sometimes this gets a little clumsy. That the student is clearly trying to use an academic voice, but it gets a little bit awkward to counter the decrease of jobs. If the use of oil was decreased, we could increase. You get kind of lost in some of the nuances there. And so what we want to make sure is that we're clear and precise in what we're trying to say. The other thing that, sorry, that I would say is that we do see that there's a lot of good transitions here. And so the student is moving in the right direction. We're going to continue to look at that medium sample. I'm going to pause again and take a look at this student's conclusion. Hopefully you're back. And what you probably noticed, we've got a lot of we's, a lot of those personal pronouns. And one of the things that we saw is that this starts to distract from the good work that the student has been doing. The reason we need to do this is that the weather patterns, well, why don't we just say weather patterns such as rainfall, tropical storms, heat waves, and droughts put others at risk? Take out some of those and really strengthen. It's okay to weave some evidence in to support what you're saying as well. Finally, we look at some high samples. And when we look at the high sample, I'm going to let you pause and just take a look about, you just looked at a low and a medium. How does this one sound just a little bit different? Welcome back. One of the things that you should see is that there's really a precision of word choice as you look through here. That you should see as we're looking through this is that the sentences are effectively written. There are great transitional phrases as the student continues to work through the paper. Sometimes what we see in the medium sentences or medium samples is that students are trying to overcomplicate. Highly recommend that maybe you watch video 4, where we talk about combining ideas using commas and semicolons as we transition towards more of these high works of student papers. If you want to look for another example, I put together a tiny URL, the 2019 PT2A, where you can really read about those transitional phrases. You can see the academic voice. You can see where the student is weaving in some of their voice in a consistent manner, but at the same time, really understanding the audience and the purpose of what they're writing. So when we talk about how do we improve things, I'm going to have you pause, and this is one that we see a lot of mistakes on. And so I'm going to let you pause, and then we'll talk about the type of feedback we would give. So hopefully you saw this as pretty casual in that quick little break that you read this paragraph. But when we come back to it, what we want you to think about is the overuse of personal pronouns, There was some colloquialisms when we talk about the okays, and that really comes off in that casual tone, that casual voice. The inconsistency with capitalization and punctuation, making sure you're using the appropriate tense throughout your paper. And also, I have to, just because of those other two videos that I did, the lack of evidence that is missing from this paper. Good writers, and this is what I want you to take away. We use a consistent style and we understand we're writing for that academic audience. I will also add this, that good writers are good readers. Continue to read. Look at the samples that we gave you. You will start to grow not only as a student, but as a writer. I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope you tune in for video 4, where they're going to really dig into semicolons and colons. Not going to lie, I can always use refreshers on that as well. And so I hope you enjoy our AP Daily videos. Have a good one. Bye.